Not sure what boat to buy? Well, looking through magazines can help, but only up to a point. Looking at the boats at the boat shows doesn't give you all the information you need. Not even with World Boat do we manage to transmit all the real sensations that you feel when using a boat. So, what's the solution? Well, it's simple. Come to the Marine Test Center Italo Monzino of the Cantiere Cranchi at San Giorgio di Nogaro. Here, available 365 days a year, are all the boats of the various ranges of the shipyard. You can choose, have them put in the water, turn the engines on, loosen the ropes, and take them out to test them at sea. It's exactly what we do at Yacht and Sail. Here is a boat that, despite its size of just 7.5 meters in length, possesses all you need to go pleasurably sailing with a family of 4 people. There are 2 cabins, a bathroom, a galley, and a very livable cockpit that can be completely shielded. This is the Cranchi Zaffiro 29. One of the advantages of this boat is the fact that, despite the size of the hull being 7.5 meters, the overall length is actually 9.18 meters, a result obtained by a large bathing platform. This is even a platform that is possibly larger than those that can be found on boats of a greater size, and then it is perfectly equipped because it can contain a tender. There's also a part in rubber that permits easy launching and hauling in, and a disappearing ladder. So, everything considered, everything that is needed, including a teak finish, so that it can be enjoyed in the best possible way. Despite being one of the smallest models of the Cranchi range, it reproposes the same trends of the more important models, such as, for example, this long window that illuminates the forecabin much more than any porthole could do. In order to optimize the length of the boat, gangways of different sizes have been created. This is the starboard one that is narrower but is nonetheless easy to use, also because it's easy to hold onto the windscreen. Plexiglass is also used in this lower part in order to lighten the side that is necessarily high to create space below deck. The Zaffiro 29 is a boat whose hull measures, imagine, just 7.5 meters. Obviously, the entire length is 9.18, but essentially this is a fairly short boat. But the livability below deck is surprising. This is also thanks to its width of 3.18 meters, making it a boat with a really large beam. That is why then you can manage to live on it so well. The cabins are not separate, and there are just curtains closing them off, and there's also only one bathroom. But there's also a galley. Let's go and see the details, because I'm sure you'll find them surprising. Cranchi has used for the creation of the interior of their latest boats the Berloni group, and the result is what you can see. It's undoubtedly a small masterpiece, above all in the management of the spaces and the precision of the furnishings. Look, for example, at this drawer that runs perfectly above the worktop in the galley and creates another useful space on board. And then there are more drawers containing plates and glasses that are provided by the shipyard. And here below, there is space for the pans. The galley is completed by a hob with pan holders on the top and, on the lower part, the fridge. But it doesn't end there, because we have yet another space, this too created specifically for the cutlery. In other words, what else can you say? It's really the best in creating so much availability for the kitchen equipment in so little space. Even on an entry-level model like the Zaffiro 29, we can find the same expensive materials that Cranchi uses on its larger boats. The teak, for example, for the steps of the ladder, the durmast for the bulkheads, and much of the furniture, and the vengay used in the decorations. It's an industrial logic that also benefits the smaller boats, which can have prices and production costs that are genuinely contained with a quality equal to those of the more important models. The dinette is organized in such a way as to host, on the sofa, at least 5 people. But there's one curious element that is worth looking at. While on the side benches you can be really comfortable, you could say that the backrest is a bit far too back to be comfortable for those sitting at the head of the table. So here's the solution. With a fairly easy movement, you can bring the backrest forward so that you can also sit here comfortably. The table is in teak with a natural veneer, but its edge is in solid wood with a thickness of about 3 centimeters, giving you an idea of the wealth of these details at a truly privileged price. There are no dividing bulkheads that would identify the areas and could thereby create a sense of claustrophobia rather than that of openness and airiness. However, the solution for creating a bit of privacy in the cabins is achieved with curtains like these, for example. You can separate the fore area from the wardroom by lowering the table and creating here, in this dinette, a double bunk bed of 180 centimeters by 2 meters in width. Another solution for giving light to the rooms below deck has been found in creating 2 oblong windows that are truly original, also due to their positioning. These are in diametrically opposite parts of the hull. One is on the starboard tank and the other, we can see here, is on the left-hand side. This, in particular, serves to give light to the aft cabin, where there is a bed that is just 110 centimeters wide but up to 190 centimeters long. For those who decide to live in this area of the boat, there has been reserved a reasonable space for the wardrobe, with various cupboards located all in this area. In order to aerate the cabin better, above all during the night when the access door to the below deck is closed, there are 2 skylights towards the main bridge. One on the top of the prow, above the forward bed, and the other in this area, right above the entrance to the second cabin. Both are provided with blinds and mosquito nets. With regard to the second cabin, you can see how in this part that allows you access, it can be closed with a curtain to be applied to the ceiling. In this way, you can create a greater privacy for when you want to change before going to bed in this area. On a 7.5 meter boat, it's surprising to find such a large bathroom, complete with a shower, WC, porthole on the side, and cupboards with a mirror. But it's not just the size of this room, but also the finish, and in particular, the fact that all the corners have been rounded off, because in a space like this, there should be no problems with knocking against corners. The detail of the design gives you an indication of how Cranchi works when it is preparing a new boat. There are engineers, architects, technicians, interior designers, or, in other words, a close-knit team working contemporaneously on the boat to get the greatest and the best result possible. An example of this? The heights. This is a boat that has a cockpit with a roll bar above it that is exactly 1.87 meters from the floor, and the interiors have the same identical measurements. Between the floor of this cabin and the ceiling there are 1.87 meters here in this area, in the wardroom, just as in the bathroom. In the cockpit of the Zaffiro 29, you can find decisive lines which are even a bit too squared off on the boat, but which in reality serve to exploit every space to the maximum rather than leaving areas unused just in order to create curved shapes. Take a look at this sofa, for example. The backrest is at the limit of the hull, and in this way it can exploit the entire cockpit area, and so there is space on the sofa for at least 6 people. We can see it now laid out as a sun deck, with a central cushion that can, however, be replaced by a dining table. In the cockpit, there have been lockers created which are all practical to use, such as, for example, below this aft sofa, which is immediately accessible. Then there is an open area below this other sofa, which is practical for quickly storing flippers and masks. And again, in this niche, where the fuel tank is stored, there is yet another section for storing other equipment. On a boat of such a small size, it becomes even more important to know how to use the space to the very best and to pay attention to every possible detail. Look, for example, at this chaise lounge, which has an anatomical shape so that it is even more comfortable. In this space, furthermore, there is an LCD television that can be seen perfectly from the entire cockpit, which stands opposite it. But this isn't just a place where you can lie down. Take a look at this. Below, there is a basin, and in the storage space below it, there is a space for fitting in the gas cylinder. It's important that the boat should also be light, so that it can use low-powered engines and naturally save both on the acquisition and the running costs. This is why special materials, like, for example, high-density polyurethane foam, are used for certain details, such as, for example, this pocket on the driving seat. It's important to note how, although this is simply a 29-footer, so a boat with a fairly contained dimension, it has a double piloting station. These are usually only found on larger boats. The arch of the roll bar doesn't just work to banally support lights and the antenna, but also has the more important role of multiplying the livability of the boat. In effect, by using the appropriate closing blinds, it's possible to close the cockpit off completely, from the roll bar to the windscreen, and, again, from the roll bar to the transom. In this way, the boat can be lived on even when the season is less favorable. One of the characteristics of the cranky boats that we naturally also find on this Zaffiro 29 model is its practicality of use. Look, for example, at how easy this prow top is. Here the surface is flat, and you can manage to inspect the descent of the cable length in an entirely safe and comfortable manner. Furthermore, the guardrail continues to be high even in this area of the boat, possibly leaving style somewhat aside, but nonetheless providing plenty of safety. There are many elements that give you an idea of the functionality of the boat, such as, for example, these fender bearers that, although it's true to say that they narrow down the side passage somewhat, they're in the most comfortable position for using the fenders. The fore sun deck has a pleasantly inclined headrest right below the windscreen, but above all, it's fixed with these systems that ensure its stability, even when the wind and sea are decidedly adverse. One thing that personally I might change is the orange lifeboat on the starboard side, which is absolutely practical to use, but which is a splash of color that I would have hidden, possibly with a relative cover. The Zaffiro 29 is a boat that Cranchi has designed so that it can be motorized with various solutions: petrol, diesel, one or two engines. There are plenty of options, all from Volvo Penta. You can choose a single petrol engine, the 5.7 1 V8, which has a power of 320 horsepower, or two petrol units of 4.31, each with a unit power of 225 horsepower. The experience of a great builder can also be seen in the details, such as, for example, the pilot's position. This chair is useful both for steering sitting down, for example, or when resting against it, possibly when the sea is rougher, and it's preferable to deaden the impact with the waves by bending your legs. As far as the pilot station is concerned, all the instruments are embedded, engraved into a dashboard that permits you to read them in a truly ideal way. There's a compass exactly in the center of the dashboard, and this can be read without any errors of parallels. Then the larger instruments, those indicating the engine revs, are farther away from the piloting station, while closer up are the smaller ones, which are thus easier to read and indicate the temperature of the engines and the angle of the trim of the feet. On the Zaffiro 29 that we've been trying out today, there are two V3 Volvo Penta units. These are turbo diesel engines with 5 pistons, 2.4 litres, equipped with all the most modern technologies to make them function to perfection, like the double camshaft at the head, the 4 valves per cylinder, a variable geometry turbine, common rail feed, and so just about everything that could be asked for from a modern and technological unit to ensure an excellent working. This version of the V3 is that of 190 horsepower, the most powerful, that which allows you to use the mass and the piston power to the maximum, expressing the maximum power possible. When sailing with the Zaffiro 29, we have to remember that this is a boat that, despite its abundant 9 meters of overall length, in reality it only has a 7.5 meter hull. So it's important to appreciate how the shipyard has managed to create a good trim at sea with such a short hull and with such a large volume with which to create cabins inside. We're taking it up to surfing speed now. Just as soon as the accelerators go down, the boat leaves the aft wake and starts to surf. The instruments tell us that we're at 2,400 revs per minute and that we're sailing at 9 knots. However, you have to take into account that at the moment we are tackling a canal that has a counterflow of 3 knots, so in reality our speed is about 12 knots, and this can be considered as the minimum surfing pace for this boat. Once it's started surfing, we can also reduce the acceleration a bit and note how the boat still keeps up a good trim. It's true that we have the availability of the flaps, but we don't have to use them, and this is a considerable advantage. We'll only use them when we find the sea or the wind against us, in order to balance the boat, or if we have guests placed on one side of the boat, and in order not to have to ask them to move, we can correct ourselves through the trim correctors of precisely the angle of inclination of the boat. We're now going to find the cruising speed of the boat. At 3,000 revs per minute, you can immediately feel how the running angle of the boat changes. It becomes much more parallel with the surface, and this allows the engines, the propellers in particular, to express their greatest yield. In effect, the speed is already 25 knots, and we still have plenty of gas at our disposal. At 3,400 revs engine, the GPS indicates 25 knots, but calculating the 3 of the countercurrent, we have to say that at this regime we can make 28 knots of speed. That's a fantastic pace for 2 turbo diesel 290 horsepower engines, and we're still in a cruising phase of performance. Obviously, we can also make up to 4,000 revs per minute, and we can try to see what speed we make. The engines have reached the maximum, and this means that the propeller is the right one. It's been calculated perfectly for this boat, and the speed is 35 knots. The Zaffiro 29 trial has really surprised me for the speed that this boat has managed to develop with 290 horsepower units. 35 knots, a truly important performance that makes me think that it's possibly superfluous to use even more powerful engines. These units have given their best throughout the range of working, from 2,000 to 3,500 revs per minute when the couple is giving its maximum. But in order to consume less fuel, we'd advise you to sail at between 25 and 28 knots when each engine has only need of 12 to 15 litres per hour. It's a truly excellent result, and it's not just Volvo's merit, but also that of Cranchi, who has managed to design a truly streamlined hull. Just one word of warning. Before enjoying yourself on the boat, please keep an eye on the weather forecast.
Occhio al meteo.